Right. We're good. So, right. Let's declare this Audit, Risk and Finance Committee open. And Mr. Chief Executive, would you like to open with the karakia, please?
Sure thing, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, te marino, kia whakapapapona mu te moana, hei hua rahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai tātou I tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you. Just quickly, we'll do the procedural issues. We've got apologies from Deputy Mayor Jonathan and Councillor Peter. Can I have mover, please? Seconder? Thank you. Say aye. Item 1.3, I am going to change the agenda around. Item 3.5, our draft risk policy. I would like to consider that after we have come out of PECS. The reason for that is we've got some items in PECS regarding risk, and I think it would be good to sort of have that discussion, then come back and have that check our discussion against the policy and see what needs to change. I'm just going to, sorry staff, it's going to have to stick around for a bit longer, but I think it's actually going to be worthwhile, so we've got something to talk about.
So that was item
3.5 on page 43.
Yep.
Will follow the public excluded once we've reconvened after being in public excluded. It's the 3.5 draft risk policy and risk appetite statement. So I'm moving that to have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Howard. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Minutes of our meeting held 7th of December. Can I have a mover, please? I'll move to have a seconder. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Our first item, page 11. Yep. Thank you. Note that in my right. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for items for decision? None. Thank you very much. Right. Our first item 3.1, page 11, our Treasury report, and welcome Julia, and more importantly, well, not more importantly, but equally as importantly, Alex Wondergem from PwC, who are our Treasury advisors. Welcome, team.
very cool. Yep.
Brenna, Your Worship, Chair and elected members. For Julia Aho, I present to you the Treasury report for the period ended 31st of January 2024. It's for information only to update you on the financial position of Council with 4 key measurements, but also to explain our approach to compliance with Treasury policy. If you recall, we've been operating outside of policy or approval since April 2023 due to Three Waters reform, where our assets and debt to Three Waters were to transfer to Entity A on 1 July 2024. We've been outside of policy as we were waiting to see what was going to happen with Three Waters before refinancing maturing debt in the next 6 months. Out of policy means we have too much debt in the short and medium term compared to what our policy dictates. So at the moment, 76% of our debt is in the 0 to 3 year period. Policy states a maximum of 60, and 24% of debt is in the 3 to 7 year period versus a minimum of 25% stated in the policy. As Three Waters reform has now been repealed and the water assets and debt are to remain with Council, we need to regain compliance. So we have already participated in the 6th of March tender with LGFA by refinancing $7 million of debt that's due to mature on the 15th of April, so that it now matures in 2028. And we're pre-funding $10 million of debt that's due to mature in October 2024. Refunding means that we're taking out the $10 million of debt and investing it for 7 months in deposit, and then we'll be using it to repay the 10 million loan that's due to mature in October. And it's currently being held in a BNZ term deposit for that period. The new maturity date for that $10 million loan is 5 million due to mature in April 29 and 5 million in May 2030. By adopting this approach, the 0 to 3 year buckets will now be 48%, and policy states that it should be between 15 and 60%. And the 3 to 7 year bucket will now be 52%. Policy stating 25 to 85%. So policy compliance has now been achieved, and it will be reported as such in the next Treasury report dated 31st of March. It does mean that the debt figure will increase to 61 million as of the end of March, but 7 million of that is going to be repaid on the 15th of April. Leaving debt at 54 million, and the extra 10 million is due to be repaid in October. So come October, we will then have a debt level of 44 million. I now hand over to Alex, our Treasury advisor from PwC, and he can explain the intricacies of our approach and also interest rate swaps that we need to consider to mitigate our interest risk.
And then we'll take questions.
Yes.
Okay, and just note, welcome Councillor Erin online.
Kia ora, apologies for my lateness. I had some technical difficulties this morning.
Thank you. All right, and you've got a presentation which has been shared. Can you see that, Councillor Erin? Screen? Thank you.
Position so you can control.
Let's do that. Controlling, right.
Yeah, there'll be a nod and a nod.
Oh, you're going to do a nod. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, right. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, the opportunity to sit here and discuss this with you today. So, Julie's done a fantastic job of outlining the recent actions and activities undertaken. What this kind of very brief kind of pack here will show is really some of the rationale behind some of these decisions that have been taken, and also some considerations around future and forward management of some of your treasury risks, materially being your borrowing and interest rate fixing decisions. We'll just to kind of quickly flick to the next page here, and maybe everyone beyond this. There's a few squiggly lines on here. I will do that. And look, within this, essentially, we're looking at potential debt forecasts. So where may your debt levels have been, and they're fairly divergent, as you can see. The one that is trailing on the bottom axis of that chart was the potential scenario under what was proposed around Three Waters Affordable Waters reform. This created that material uncertainty, and it's probably fair to say continues to do so. But certainly this was part of the actions that were taken around this time last year in terms of refinancing borrowing that was due to mature last year into a shorter term debt maturity. It wasn't felt appropriate at that point in time to make a longer term financing decision, given the significant potential changes that could be occurring from 1 July. Notably, that debt may no longer sit on your balance sheet. Therefore, the discussion at that point in time was to borrow shorter term and make a further refinancing decision when there were some known outcomes around that affordable waters reform. Whilst maybe we still look at this and say we're not quite sure where it's going, it does look under the current proposal around local water done well, that it will remain on your balance sheet in terms of the borrowing amounts, and hence it will be yours to manage and refinance rather than the proposed entity A. So what was a debt forecast scenario of almost no external debt is not to be, and we are now looking at some of those lines significantly higher up the chart there on that right hand side of the page, and notably we're using the annual plan forecast, noting that the LTP as this is currently referencing is from 2021, so that's obviously susceptible and liable to change. So pinkish line at the top is the line that we're talking to into some of the debt forecasts that we're looking to manage to. Thanks for zooming that. So moving on to kind of recent activity undertaken in terms of your physical borrowing, you did have and do have $7 million that is due to expire or due to be repaid to the local government funding agency on the 15th of April this year. So almost exactly a month away. In advance of that, and as part of proactive refinancing activity, that has been refinanced last week with the local government funding agency for an extended tenor. That borrowing has now been undertaken such that $7 million has been borrowed through to April 2028, so 4-year maturity from today. 7 million is therefore still repayable to the LGFA next week. You have the proceeds that you've just received to make that repayment. So in essence, the net result of that transaction is to extend the borrowing tenor a further 4 years. You've further looked to refinance an October borrowing expiry that you had, which was 10 million. Again, as part of prudent and forward management of that refinancing risk, you have borrowed that money in advance. And so there's been 2 tranches of 5 million each. They've been borrowed through to 2029, 2030, that extend your borrowing duration and tenor and create that certainty over that period. That does leave you with 10 million of proceeds that you now have, which you've just mentioned, Julia, is being invested with the BNZ, which will expire just prior to that October maturity period where you need to repay that 10 million. So in essence, whilst there has been 17 million of new borrowing undertaken, it is all to refinance upcoming debt maturities of 17 million. And so on a net basis, no increase in your net debt position, whilst your gross debt position has increased. You have an offsetting 17 million of current call cash and term deposits as well.
Yep.
What that does achieve is extending your borrowing duration and tenor and re-establishing that compliance with your liability management policy framework, which you've noted and Julie mentioned, we're presently outside of that policy framework, given the continuing uncertainty around water reform. That has now been amended in such that you are now compliant with policy. So good. The next page, again, there's a few charts here, but there's green lights now in terms of where you are against your policy parameters and framework, and you have a spreading of your duration of your borrowing periods. There is another kind of note there to make there as well. You have a borrowing facility from the BNZ, which is what we would call a committed standby or liquidity facility, meaning that it is there to support any very short-term and immediate borrowing needs you might have, but the general intention is not to utilise that. Think of it as a backstop. That has an upcoming expiry term. It will need to be extended with the BNZ, and the intention would be to request extension for a 2 to 3 year period to make sure that you have that capacity maintaining. There's no intention to borrow that or request a longer tenor than that. It's not core funding, it is a standby facility, a just in case type facility. You don't need to pay the premium for additional duration there.
And there's a cost for that facility?
Yes, there is a cost for that facility. What is a key focus on in terms of that renegotiation and that refinancing is to minimise that cost. And the balance of the cost is trying to mitigate and minimise what is called the commitment fee. So for the luxury of BNZ providing you that facility, they need to allocate their bank capital against that. They require a return against that. The RBNZ requires that they get a return against that. That is a key driver to minimise that basis. On drawdown, there's an additional cost. The expectation is that that facility is not drawn. And so the minimisation of the commitment fee, which is very low, is the intention.
I can confirm that we have extended it for another 2 years, and the commitment fee has been reduced by 0.05%. It's a saving of about $15,000 a year.
So yeah, just for a clarification, so this 10 million which we have extended
Yes.
till the, so why don't we just look at getting that 10 million deposit paid off before maturity and paid the debt? Why we had to extend this?
We've taken the 10 million out now and placed it in a term deposit. And when that term deposit matures, it will be.
Can I rephrase the question? Right. So I know the answer, right?
Okay.
It was normally when you take out a mortgage or facility with a bank, you can sort of repay it, sort of not quite on demand, but almost, right? Unfortunately, when you borrow from LGFA, you can't repay earlier than the set date. So you've got to, if it's due in
October.
you've got to repay it on that date. You can't repay it anymore. Well, you can, but they'll still charge you interest because I've actually borrowed from somewhere else. So
Yeah.
I'm just passing the cost on. It's pass-through costs.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Ed?
Yeah, that's unfortunate though. That it can't.
It's unfortunate,
Yeah.
but just bearing in mind the interest rate that we receive using LGFA, I'm not going to put figures into your mouth, Alex. What's the margin that we actually get if we were a non-local authority? You know, back in the days before LGFA, we would be probably paying at least 1, if not 1.5%. Is that?
Your borrowing cost of margin would be double what it is by the RGFA.
All right, so that's the benefit of having. All right, so we've got to work within the system.
Thank you.
Carry on. Thank you.
So the funding position, and this is the physical borrowing, it's all been recommended to be borrowed on a floating interest rate basis, has now been achieved. So you've refinanced what you have upcoming in April, you've refinanced what you have upcoming in October. Your next borrowing maturity is not until 2025. There'll be a further discussion around that refinance activity closer to the time. Any new borrowing that's required this year will also be discussion as to the timing of when that's required and what the prevailing market conditions are around borrowing tenor, term, pricing, etc. We move to the next section. What I did want to highlight or discuss with you today also is that borrowing is all being undertaken on a floating interest rate basis, which leaves you exposed to movements in the floating interest rate, which I think we can all agree is quite elevated at the moment. There is therefore an opportunity and in fact, per your policy, a requirement to look at fixing some of that floating interest rate risk and that exposure to volatility and floating interest rates. The same reason is why we didn't extend materially terms of borrowing last year, the physical borrowing. We also did not look to consider any additional interest rate fixing longer term either, given that the debt may not have been sitting on your balance sheet. Now that it will, this is a topic of conversation again around how do we establish and re-establish compliance with our policy framework, noting where the market conditions are. Interest rates are high. I think we all know that, and probably most of us feeling that personally. The expectation is that those will fall. The timing of which is a key question, albeit the current market pricing is such that that will be happening at some point this year. And in fact, forward interest rates are factoring that in. The floating interest rate is currently the highest interest rate you can pay. 5.65% is the BKBM, or that's the floating reference rate. The lowest borrowing rate right now is around a 5-year fixed rate, which is around 4.35%. There's a 1.3% difference between the current floating rate and a 5-year fixed rate, which might naturally incline you to undertaking some fixing towards that period. And that does align with our recommendations to you in terms of re-establishing compliance with your policy parameters to say that there is a minimum level of fixing of your interest rate risk in place such that you have certainty over what your interest cost will be over a period, notwithstanding the interest rate still, even at a 4.35% level, is high relative to recent history, and that may not incline you to do too much more than you have to. Our strategy and recommendation to you, which is on the next page, is to consider a minimum level of interest rate fixing. So to achieve and re-establish compliance with your policy parameters, which are to have a degree of certainty without extending materially either the amount of fixing or the tenor of that fixing. You have an ability to fix your interest rates for a 10-year period, potentially longer, through a bank counterparty, which is the BNZ in this instance. They will provide you with an interest rate swap, which will exchange your floating rate cash flows for fixed up to 10 years. That's not our recommendation at this point. Our recommendation is to consider fixing terms out to 5-6 year periods.
A question, just on that matter, you're recommending a long-term fixing and the interest rates are going down. So I guess there is room for movement downwards for this. And my question is more related to our assumption of that this debt is going to stay in our book for 4 or 5 years. That may not be true, because if there is a CCO established by the...
Then we just hold that question
Yeah.
about CCO to the
Yeah.
That's a wider discussion rather than a point of clarification.
Thank you.
That is correct. I think there is an expectation that interest rates will fall, that they have peaked. I think we've had that reconfirmed by the Reserve Bank recently. A 5.5% OCR is the peak of the OCR. Financial markets are pricing these declines already. In fact, there is current market pricing would suggest that there is a certainty there will be interest rate cut to the OCR in October. That is not what the Reserve Bank told us 2 weeks ago, but that is where the financial markets are pricing that expectation. Forward swap rates are priced that in. So you're seeing that benefit of the market expectation come through that 5-year plus fixing term. So that 4.35 that's achievable is factoring in this expectation that rates move lower. The question would be, how much lower do they go? Has the market got that right? Could it go further? And hence we're trying to strike the right balance between certainty, reducing your interest costs today relative to the floating interest rate, achieving compliance with your policy, which is giving you that underlying certainty to your forecasts and planning and budget processes, but not necessarily extending ourselves materially beyond that on the expectation that there may be further declines that are possible here, and wanting to leave room and capacity to participate in those as well. So it's trying to strike that right balance between certainty and flexibility. The products that we're recommending is the most common interest rate fixing product in the world, called an interest rate swap, of which there are trillions of these globally. And we are suggesting that you enter up to 15 million of new interest rate fixing by 3 tranches of 5 million each. Those swaps don't necessarily all start immediately either, and there's an ability to start these in the future periods. But what that will achieve is a lengthening of your interest rate fixing term, compliance with the policy minimum requirements, and in a number of instances, reducing your current borrowing cost as well relative to floating, with some of these starting in the near term. We have seen movement lower recently, and we continue to see this. And so there's a piece to discuss with Julia and Jesse and Sue and myself around execution tactics. So whilst we might agree in principle the strategy, what is the right level to tell the BNZ that we're willing to execute? And that can be where we can set a target rate for implementation that's lower than what's currently being observed. And we would suggest that is part of the strategy that is brought into the conversation as well. So interest rate fixing is something that policy dictates is needed. We believe this is the appropriate way to undertake that. Obviously, the final decision is yours.
So a portion remains floating, is that your recommendation?
Correct.
What's that split?
So essentially this would, and I'm just going to try and read this off the board, it'd be close to 60% still remaining floating. Achieving your minimum level of fixing just above 40, it's 41% of that. So it's still a fairly substantial portion that's exposed to floating, but that's that ability to participate in further movements lower. And where we do see those, we will continue to suggest and recommend additional fixing.
So like everybody, you're still forced in a position where you're almost crystal ball gazing on what's going to happen.
So just to clarify, right? I think this is really important for the committee. Our job is not to speculate. Our job is to take a position on the information we have at the moment.
Position we can.
Yeah.
So can I clarify, the position we hold is going to change by October. So 10 million will be repaid.
Yes.
So it will not be 76%. It will be below 60%.
48. But that's all.
Yeah. So why we should fix 4 and 5 years? So we will be under the policy.
The 10 million is relating to your physical borrowing, which is on a floating interest rate basis. Re-borrowed or you borrowed in advance last week, a further 10 million, that is also on a floating interest rate basis. So thinking of those two together, the best way to think about that is it's essentially just extending the term of that borrowing maturity on a floating basis. So it doesn't increase or decrease, it just lengthens. You still maintain that floating rate exposure on that. And particularly with your debt forecast suggesting you're going to maintain some core debt for a period. Yeah, hearing conversation that could change.
Sorry, it doesn't go to my brain what you're trying to say. Is all I'm saying, even if it's under floating, it is under the 76 bracket. You take 10 million off and give us the picture then.
Yes.
0 to 3.
Yeah.
Regardless of what, say do nothing, what's the picture by October?
So what we're talking to there in terms of 76% is the physical borrowing maturities from the LGFA.
Yeah.
The picture on the screen here is relating to the level of fixing. So those borrowing maturities and those borrowing that you have from the LGFA are borrowed on a floating interest rate basis. So what this is discussing is a separate issue, which is what is a proportion of those physical borrowings that are on a fixed interest rate basis or a floating. So there's two things we're trying to manage here. One is the maturity period of those physical borrowings and making sure we don't have excessive concentrations of physical borrowing maturing any one period. But we're also trying to manage the interest rate movements, and this is the OCR, the BKBM, and the level of fixing, which is separate. So we are talking to two separate risk frameworks to be managing.
I understand, but I repeat my question. You're just going around and around. All I'm saying, come October, 10 million paid. What's the bracket? Because we are not trying to create another layer of fixing and trying to measure thing for 6 months. That's not the intention. The intention is will be compliant in the short period later. So why we should go through all this drama for 10?
No, because even if it's so in October, right, we will, I think that the issue is we're talking cross purposes here. We've talked about, we to be compliant,
Yeah,
there's two things we need to do to be compliant. The first is we need to talk about our borrowings, which is that 10 million, which is in October. We also need to fix a portion of our debt. And Alex has said the policy requires us that we actually fix, is it between 40 and up, what's the maximum?
15 to 60.
Yeah, 90.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we are at the lower end of that fixing. So we're at 41%.
Totally understand that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, it has been the case for a long time. It's not today that it has happened. It wasn't the last meeting. It was the meeting before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is not, it can wait for 6 months and then we don't have to do this. That's what I'm saying.
No, we have to, no, if we.
Okay, I'll leave it with you. That's my query.
The question, right, if we do nothing, we don't take any more fixing.
Yes.
We'll be outside of policy.
Correct. Remain outside of policy.
And outside of policy.
Till October, which is not,
No, even after October.
no, we can fix in October.
Oh, yes, you could remain outside of policy until October. Yeah, but, right,
That's all I'm saying.
why are we remaining outside of policy until October?
Well, why we are getting it?
Can I just, right?
Yeah.
The issue is, why wouldn't we want to fix now?
I gave you one reason.
Yeah, right.
One is that it may be taken over. That's another mistake we are making.
Can we just hold that conversation?
Yeah, but in the light of that, yeah.
Right, because I want to talk about the overall position about where the future of water is going, right, at the end, rather than actually trying. At the moment, we have said we need to be in policy. So this actually says we are trying to be in policy. That's the objective that we're trying to deal with. Now, I understand your question, councillor, absolutely, and I think we need to have that. Right? We've also got the ability every 3 months to review our position, and this changes on the delivery of your capital works. The more capital works you deliver, the more debt you need. Therefore, you actually need to, this is a live conversation that we have every 3 months. We're only in March now, so we'll be having another, no, maybe not with Alex here, in June and again in September.
Well, my concern is, Chair, and I want to be very clear because there's a purpose, there's a reason I joined this committee, is that all these decisions have been made, the 7 million paid, whatever, already taken, and we are just going ahead and saying we will do that. And if we take the decision again of fixing for 4 and take a swap rate, we are again meeting after 3 months, talking about something which has already been done. So that's not the purpose of this meeting.
What you're asking for
Delay.
is delay, remain outside of policy.
Yeah.
And the reason for why do you want to remain, this is what I haven't heard from you, is why do you want to remain outside policy? Is it because of Three Waters? I don't think that's a valid reason.
No.
I'll tell you why. Are you of the view that interest rates are going to be significantly lower than what the market is predicting now than in October? Because if you're doing that, is actually, in my opinion, starting to speculate, which is we're actually prohibited under the Local Government Act from speculating. Yes, you as an individual can do that because that's your money.
No, I'm not talking, sorry, let me clarify. I'm doing it for 2 reasons. One, we are gonna repay this debt anyway, so there's no need for refinancing it.
No, we're refinancing it because we're repaying it because we don't have the cash in October to repay it. It's a
We have the cash in October, 10 million term deposit is coming.
That 10 million term deposit has only been generated because you've borrowed last week from the LGFA.
No, but we have one sitting there, I was told.
Yeah, we
Can you
do,
clarify?
sitting there, but that's to fulfil our capital projects that are basically said they'll be completed.
Well, I don't understand. I mean, that is it's common sense. We have 10 million, we are going another 10 million borrowed, and then we are fixing it for 5. I will be deadly against this. So I'll just give my views. Thank you.
And I think you need to just remind people that why we've got Alex here and why we're looking at something different is because we've only known about Three Waters coming into back to council in December, and this is the first audit and risk.
No, that's all right. That's fine. Just wondering we can delay it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, how much more have you got to go, Alex?
Not a lot. So I'm happy to take any kind of further questions. So the recommendation really there is to consider additional interest rate fixing to ensure you're compliant with your minimum policy parameters. The reason and the key reason and rationale for being outside of policy was the uncertainty in regards to reform. Now that there is a high degree of certainty, if not completely certain, there is an opportunity to re-establish that policy compliance through entering interest rate fixing instruments.
Okay. And I think now, Mr. Chief Executive, I could just ask your opinion, because it's only an opinion. How long do you think it will be before the new CCO models are likely to be up and running? Right? And this is the problem we've got. We've got no idea at this stage what the CCO model will actually look like in terms of where the debt will actually reside.
So through you, Mr. Chair, look, that's pluck, I have to say. What I would say is what we do know now is that the government has said a regional CCO model with no funding provided by central government is the preferred option. The kicker is that no funding provided by central government piece, to be fair. What we do also know is that from July this year, we will be required to submit our water plans within the next year. And through that process, it will be determined whether or not regional CCO is feasible for Auckland or Auckland or whatever the conclusions could be. And then we're going to have to go back to government at that point and let them know. So, feasibly, we could be looking at least another 2 to 3 years before we even get any certainty.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I was at a presentation last week where a representative from LGA, Local Government New Zealand, who had actually been in a conversation around with government DIAS about it. And his advice was, it's going to take about 3 years, right? Before there's any, there's some areas might happen sooner rather than later, but there's a huge amount of work to occur. So that's why I want to have that discussion. We won't probably have any certainty. And I would say we're probably going to get some certainty about the time of the next central government election. That to me, so it might be a political, right? It will be another political football. That's all I can say. Excuse the pun, but there's a huge amount of water to go under the bridge.
Yep.
All right. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one simple question on this, and I take on board first off the no speculation. And I think that to me, this seems like, I'm not exactly sure where our compliance with policy sits with this, but you're talking about 5-year fixing. And I know that you said that the 5-year term is the one that's looking like being priced in for reductions at the moment. But the other side of this is to reduce our costs, not our interest costs. So why would we not consider right now, or say a 2-year fix? Because the direction is interest rates coming down. Not, as you say, we don't know how fast, and how much. But so surely a more conservative pathway rather than fixing for full 5 years, which could actually have us paying more than even a floating rate in 5 years. Speculation, perhaps. So I just wonder about a more conservative thing and how that would pit us against policy.
Yeah, happy to answer that. The short answer is that won't achieve policy compliance. The reason for that is that your policy requires a minimum level of fixing that extends over that 5-year horizon. So fixing for 2 years will increase your near-term certainty, but it will leave you continue to be exposed beyond those periods. And so you won't achieve that overall level of minimum compliance. There's another reason, and to your point around, does that not provide us with a lower borrowing cost? The interest rate, what's called the curve or its shape, is reasonably interesting at the moment. The highest point on that curve is the floating interest rate. It heads down and then flattens. Where that point flattens in the inflection is around 5 years. So the difference between a 5-year rate and a 10-year is nigh on the same. A 2-year rate is materially higher than a 5-year rate at the moment. So you would be paying.
Still less than the floating.
Still less than floating, but more than a 5-year. So the 2-year wasn't considered, given it wouldn't achieve the overall and overarching objective, which is to re-establish a minimum level of compliance, but also the 5-year is what we would say is the current sweet spot in the curve. I appreciate the comments around we're trying to find the right balance between certainty, not trying to speculate here, and hence that we want to be compliant with policy, but let's not do too much just here as well. Let's leave ourselves some flexibility and headroom to continue to make decisions as we get more information.
So if I may ask a supplementary, Mr. Chair, what is the difference then between floating and that projected 5?
So in a perfect world, you should be indifferent between floating over that 5-year period or fixing for this 5-year period.
Yep.
The reason being that the no free lunch theory, the 5-year rate is derived from the expectations of where that floating rate moves over a period. So at the end of that 5-year term, all going to plan, that 5-year fixed rate will be above the floating. But to begin with, that floating is above the 5. So to see that kind of graphically, you've got a floating rate that goes down like this over 5 years, whereas you're going to lock in a 5-year rate that just goes straight line through the middle over the period. So I guess that is where the art comes into the science as well, which is, do we believe and have confidence that the floating rate will move further lower than what that 5-year rate is currently implying? Or do we think that there's a number of interest rate cuts that have been priced in that our Reserve Bank 2 weeks ago told us were highly unlikely in next year? Our current view is there's market's probably gone a little bit too far, too fast, and there's an opportunity to establish a minimum level of compliance at what are some rates that are perhaps advantageous relative to where floating rate will eventually average out.
I guess I have the concern that fixing for 5 years and with what we know is coming is a bind.
Could I add to that?
Yep.
These instruments are negotiable, meaning that whilst you're making this commitment today, we can have this conversation in 3 months' time. The world's different. We can renegotiate these contracts.
You can.
Yes.
And I think that's the key that we need to be
Thank
doing.
you.
That's why I was signalling that we need to have another conversation like this in June. The other thing too is I think while the market are anticipating a cut, right? Markets sometimes get ahead of themselves, and the ANZ got it horribly wrong, and they said we got it wrong. I would also look outside of New Zealand and look at the geopolitical nature. It's high risk. So what happens in a high risk environment to interest rates? Straight go up. Okay. So for me, we are living in not only undynamic times for what we're trying to achieve in our three waters, but we've also got uncertainty in the world environment. And correct me if I'm wrong, the 10-year rate is predominantly driven out of the US market.
Correct.
I think that's a good summation from what I've been reading. It's pretty volatile, right?
It's horrendously volatile. So I think being on the conservative side of our policy is the right place to be, on the basis that we'll revisit it in June. We might have an LTP close by then.
Just clarification, sorry. So when you renegotiate your swap rates, there is a cost to it based on the interest rates. So you're not winning anything.
There's a potential benefit or cost depending on where the markets move. So you lock in for 5 years at 4.35%. Interest rates are volatile, inflation numbers are higher, interest rate cuts are priced out. We have this conversation in 3 months' time. The equivalent 5-year rate is now 4.5%. Your contract is more valuable than where the current market rate is.
So they will have a cost.
You have a benefit. Your rate is sub-market.
Because they will lose.
You wouldn't renegotiate on that basis.
Yes. Yeah, you probably wouldn't. You'd be quite pleased with yourself. Conversely, it could go the opposite. Inflation is lower, more cuts are priced in. The rate in 3 months' time is 4.2% and you're at 4.35.
Yeah.
This constantly moves.
Yeah, that's the break free, the bank. I've been in the bank for a long time. So, I mean, I can tell you, we're not going to win if the interest rates go down.
If interest rates go down and materially, then yes, any level of fixing is going to be above where things are moving. Those declines are expected. It's the pace of those declines is really what's in question.
Yep.
Right, thank you. Any more questions, comments? So if we go back to the agenda, we're actually noting the January report. Yep. And we approve the Treasury, well, we actually just approving the Treasury with non-compliant, but with, I would say it's actually, we are approving it. It's actually not the Treasury policy, are we? We just.
It's approving the non-compliant Treasury ratios
Yes.
and moving towards compliance.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
That would be good to put in.
Yeah, yes. And then we've got a C, approves the actions. I mean, the actions have already been undertaken, right? So I would actually be suggesting we actually confirm. I understand your concerns, councillor, right? But we're actually, and I'm very happy that we confirm the actions to get the debt portfolio in line with the Treasury policies as of 31st of March, noting that a further review will occur in June. I'm happy to move those. Do I have a second? Thank you, councillor Mike. Any discussion?
Just 1 moment.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah. Okay.
I'm saying that, was that what I was saying too?
That there'll be a further review in June 2024, not 2025.
Through Chair, can you note my dissent in this matter?
So can I suggest if you, right, the way your dissent, right, you vote against it, right?
Okay.
And you ask for your vote to be recorded.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we've got a mover and a
Sorry, I didn't, so that was yourself?
yeah, moved, yeah, and councillor Mike.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't put the motion yet, right? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. As against? And you would like your vote recorded?
Yeah.
Okay, no.
So, I mean, we have been, as you said, the reason it is, I may explain if you
Yeah.
want to.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Happy to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Next item, 3.2, page 23, our financial report. Hopefully we won't spend 50 minutes on this.
Worthwhile though.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you. So this report just gives you an update on the council's financial transactions at 31 January 2024. The report was made to all elected members in last month's council meeting, so I won't summarise it again, but I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Any questions? I've got one. It's not for you. And I think the chief executive knows what's coming. All right. Capital Works. Are we going to, how much are we going to achieve by year end, Mr. Chief Executive? You can refer to your learned friend on your right.
Well, indeed, in time, if we could. So this has been a conversation, thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been a conversation that the council has had quite regularly.
Yep.
Obviously, my understanding is we're working really hard
Mine is different.
to get the capital works delivered that we can. We are forecasting 17 million worth of carry forwards at this stage.
This is quarterly.
Alan, would you like to add to that?
Through you, Chair. We are currently doing a final position to come back to council in April. And that will obviously form part of the conversation in terms of a capital program next year. We have been facing some difficulties in the market. One, we haven't been receiving any tenders for projects. And more recently, we've received tenders that exceed our budget. So it's that combination. We've had already forecasted some purpose like the shared path, that's a project. And obviously have recruited successfully. We were down to one project manager very early on in the financial year. We've now got our place. So going forward, we're okay, but we will be forecasting a carryover. And at the moment, it's sitting at about 17 billion. We're getting contracts out in the market, see how the prices come back. And obviously, if they're coming back higher than what we believe we need to pay, then we're not going to be recommending that we extend our budget. It's just that the market is quite buoyant and active at the moment.
One final point, if I may, Mr. Chair, and that is, obviously the storm events that we've had, the focus has been on those recovery aspects as well, which has obviously had a flow-on effect to the other programs.
And of course, there's a little bit of a construction happening somewhere out that way, which is probably a fair bit of work at the moment, I would imagine as well.
Just a clarification, if I could, through the chair. So, I mean, in the report, it said we have now budgeted 37 million to spend. We have 7 million from the previous year. Or what's the balance now? How much money we still have for the capital works to spend?
So through you, Chair, I think it's probably better that we do our due diligence that we're doing at the moment and come back in April as we have signalled for the last couple of months. So they'll give us we'll have all our March figures locked in. So that gives us a good view going forward. So April is what we're committing to come back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we won't be here till June, that's all right. Yeah. All right, thank you very much, Jessie. So we've got a mover for the recommendation that we note the financial report for January 24. Thank you, Councillor Aaron's moved. You got a question or are you moving it?
I'm moving it, thank you.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. As it's carried. Next item, 3.3, our quarterly debtors report. Welcome, Lani. We'll take your report as read while you are there. Are there any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Hi, Chair. No, just that we have had good success with our mortgagee demands this year, so they are looking quite low compared to last year, and most of the buckets have reduced compared to the same time last year. We are doing very well in this space considering the rates increases year on year. We're not seeing the arrears debt increasing year on year. And in terms of the other debtors, they're all seem to be going well. People are meeting their payment arrangements that they have with us. And there's lots of different types of debt in that bucket. So that's all really.
That's the highlight on page 31.
Which you can answer.
Yeah,
that's just a quick question. So if you go on page 4 and look at the 31st July versus
of the report, yep.
The numbers have actually gone down. The numbers, for example, Maori Freeland 81 instead of 95, right? And same the other places you look at, charging order in place, you've gone from 17 to 2. Payment arrangement, you've gone to 19 to 13. So how come the payment arrangement 19 to 13, but the amount has gone almost double?
Whereabouts are you looking?
I'm talking page 4, arrears of date, 31st July versus 31st October.
Sorry,
Yeah,
There's a table there.
I'm looking at a different.
Summarize the key debt categories compared to the last report.
Oh, yeah, so that's 31st of January, so that's a year ago.
Sorry, I'm talking 31st of July 2023 to 31st of October, page 4.
Sorry, councillor, I don't have the same information you've.
Quarterly debt report, I mean, I don't know why I have this. This is page 4 of quarterly debtors report, that's what we're talking.
it's under what heading? Can you see what's the heading is?
Heading is where you say the arrears of debt. Okay, you can see it here, so right here. It's not right.
No, you must have gone into a previous, because it's October 23. You've gone into October.
Okay,
Okay,
Need to go into the audit and risk for today.
so it has actually
yeah,
Yeah.
risk committee, it's fun.
But you've got the,
But that's 3.7 item anyway, this same thing.
you're in,
3.3, it's item 3.3, page 31 of the agenda.
councillor, no, you're in October, you're in a different,
Okay, it's just a work program, is that?
no, we're in debtors report, but you're, the whole, it looks like to me that you haven't got the right audit and risk and finance meeting agenda up.
Oh, okay. Could be. Let's go back then. Thank you.
Okay, no, yeah, that's why I was slightly getting confused, because I actually saw numbers generally trending down, apart from abandoned land's gone from 11 properties of 390,000 to 12 properties of 495, and we've talked about abandoned land before, and other have gone from 92 to from 398 to 455, 505. But everything else, you highlight, was actually trending down.
Yeah, and with the other category, those are the ones that start to get a lot more complex and you just can't get a lot of traction on them. We've postponed 32,000 of rates over 3 accounts, and we're also seeing more allodial and sovereign citizens who refuse to pay. So they will kind of trend upwards until we take legal action on them to secure the debt. But we don't want to do that too quickly, because that will cost more legal fees ultimately.
And the advantage of actually postponing, if I can just do your job for you, postponing rates, you actually, under a postponement policy, you avoid the 6-year rule.
Yeah, and you're getting the current rates paid, so
yeah,
just.
Okay, all right. So I think the highlight is January last year, you had roughly 4.7 million of outstanding. It's now down to 4.4, despite the current economic climate of people actually struggling to pay their bills.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, just I got the right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So if you go on page 1 of the arrears of debt, the Maori freehold land, my question is, it has gone down by 5 million. Is it written off or is it recovered?
500,000.
500,000, sorry.
So it's a combination.
More has been written off.
Yeah, and I think we have presented that to you in previous meetings, what's been written off. We've recently had a large recoverable amount. So since the last report, we've had 36,000 recovered in Māori land debt, and a lot of work's being done in that space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Barney? So we've got a recommendation that we note the quarterly debtors report for March 2024. I almost said 23 then. Can I have a mover, please?
I can move it.
Councillor Ash, seconded. Mayor Craig, all those, no further discussion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Next item is 3.4, our policies and bylaw update. Like where they just magically appear, hopefully.
Will come. But what's the charging order, just out of?
Lani is. A charging order is where you've gone to the court.
Does it cost us?
Yeah, but it's recoverable because the costs and securing the debt is actually legally allowed to be added onto the. Okay, so yes, it costs us in the short term, but providing we get the cash, we will generally do, apart from the land, we'll get the money. It's a timing issue. Right.
Thank you.
Give Shireen.
Shireen, welcome, Shireen. We take your report as read. On page 39, item 3.4, are there any highlights that you want to bring to this committee's attention?
Not in particular. Thank you for taking the report as read. There's no particular highlights. The only thing I wanted to talk to is that I'm aware that there's been some questions around the policies that the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee has requested to review and make recommendations to Council to. Just wanted to confirm those are the risk policy and framework, the sensitive expenditure policy, which have both been presented to this meeting, and then the fraud policy and the whistleblowing policy. Once the risk policy and the sensitive expenditure policy reviews have been completed, that means all of the policies that the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee has expressed an interest in will have completed their 3-year review, so there won't be any more reviews due until the next triennium. The only suggestion I was going to make, and I've mentioned this to the governance advisors, that a future Audit, Risk and Finance Committee would be great to have that clarity in the terms of reference that the ARF reviews those particular 4 policies and then makes recommendations to Council. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you. I agree with that. That's for the future Council to actually make those terms of reference. And I think we've done well, team. We've achieved everything we needed to achieve in the training. Councillor, I'm just a bit of tongue in cheek.
Yeah, well, just nothing on policies, but just on wording on like private road seal extension and alcohol control. You used a word, is it a typo or is it review process in train with council? What is in train means?
I mean, it's progressing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
That's very interesting. Just say, okay.
It's a railway issue. I think someone moved along those lines.
Well, the trains are not going in New Zealand, so it will never be done.
Right?
Parallel.
Parallel.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Right. Simple report. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
So you're going to move the recommendation, Councillor Mike? Is that what I heard?
Yep.
All right. Seconded. Councillor Aaron, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Now, the next item of 3.5, we're going to leave till the end of the meeting. So the next item we've got is 3.6, page 73, our sensitive expenditure policy.
Thank you. Yes, so this report is made as the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee have previously requested to review the sensitive expenditure policy. So the purpose of the policy is to mitigate the risk of incorrect spending on costs that have the potential to be perceived as giving a personal benefit. And as our council is funded largely by the rate-paying public, we have a higher responsibility to ensure proper and prudent spending of this money. The policy has been reviewed by staff already as part of its 3-yearly review, and the staff proposed changes are discussed in your report and the attachments to the report. The changes staff have made to the policy so far are simply to simplify the policy by removing repetitions of separate standalone policies, and instead we're referencing those, just tightening travel and meal expenditure, and streamlining the policy by just deleting repetitive wording. So you now have the opportunity to give feedback and ask questions on these changes, and after today's recommendations are incorporated, we will take this to the full council for adoption.
Thank you. Thank you for that good summation. Any questions?
I will have a question. Thank you, Chair. So there are a lot of strike backs and a lot of changes. I've never seen something like that, and good to see that it's happening. I don't know who is the driver for these changes, and do we have an obligation? Is an overarching local government act say that these things cannot be changed?
The main crux of what we're trying to achieve with the policy is under the Officer of the Auditor General's guidance. And yes, we do have a really big responsibility in this space. All the red lines and the, cutting of the policy was just simply, it was repeating a lot of other policies that we have already. And when those policies need to be updated, this policy would then need to be updated, and it just added a lot of noise. And while all those things are needing to be thought about, we didn't need to repeat the wording so much, and there was quite a lot. For example, the staff gift policy, we've got a gifting policy already. We didn't need to repeat the wording inside this one. So, and that policy itself was created in 2012 and has had very minor changes since then. So we just felt it was needed to really refresh and make sure that it was fit for purpose today.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, look, I've got one, or actually two questions. The question I have, right, it's the application. This is a bit one because it actually potentially does affect me, right? In the actual policy, and if I go to the final one, right, on 4.1, it's this policy applies to any person, I understand, performing their duties, including contractors and consultants acting on behalf of council. But a lot of it is about expenditure with council. I just wonder, the question that I have is, so reading the policy, I couldn't see how contractors and consultants would actually comply with the detail of the policy. They should be complying with the spirit of the policy. Yeah, but how do we actually?
We felt that the onus really fell on staff to make sure when they're engaging in those contracts and approving those costs, that they actually considered whether it was appropriate or not at that stage.
So, to me, that's the bit I think is missing.
Okay.
All right, it's the how. It's the how.
It's a connection there.
It's a connection there.
We can definitely put something further in that.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, for my sins, I've read one or two of these. Right? The question I have is that the Mayor approves the Chief Executive's extensive expenditure?
That's correct.
Who approves the Mayor's? Where's that?
That's subject to the EMs have got their own policy. So they've got an elected members policy, yeah?
Through you, Chair, so the Deputy Mayor is responsible for approving the.
Okay, so yeah,
that other policy.
And that, in your particular case, and look, I understand that that's in the other policy. I actually wonder, because you've got that statement there, I wonder if there needs to be a footnote to say the Mayor's expenditure is approved subject to the member's expenditure without actually quoting the actual chapter and verse from that policy, because someone picking up this.
Yes.
Because these are quite, how would I describe it, well publicised policies, and they do tend to get a little bit of airtime from the media.
Happy to make that change.
And my last one is probably a question for the Chief Executive, right? Some policies specifically talk about airline memberships, right? Right? And air points, what happens with those, right? The policy is silent on that. Is that addressed elsewhere?
I can confirm that it's part of our internal process. We do not allow anyone to add their flybys or air points to any transaction paid by council. Yeah. So it's part of our internal process. Would you like it to be?
No, not at all. No, not at all. No. Why I say that, right, is I was at one council where the recommendation from the OAG was that air points shouldn't be accrued on council business. The council went against that policy.
Oh.
Yeah. If you are actually flying, generally you're flying in your own time and you get $4.50 if you're lucky, right? In terms of dollars. So if you get $4.50 for travelling in your own time as well done. Right? And because the council had debated it, Audit was actually happy that there was actually rationale for, reason for, and just put, but you've said it's elsewhere, that's, I'm comfortable, it's the management political discussion, all right? So, no, apart from those minor.
I've noted those.
Yeah, cool. Right. So I have a mover that we recommend the sensitive expenditure policy subject to those two minor amendments. I'm happy to move. Seconded, councillor Mike. Although, sorry, Aaron, you just waved a little bit. Blame the lag in the internet. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Our next item is item 3.7, page 105, a health, safety and wellbeing update. Thank you, Glenys, for sitting there so patiently while we've been dealing with bean counter stuff.
Good morning. I take it the report has been read.
Yes.
I think the one thing that I would add from this is actually something that's happened in this quarter, not the quarter that I've reported on, but that was to do with the unfortunate death of two rally drivers. But I just wanted to reference this report. One of the things that we did during this period was that we created a health and safety evaluation for all community events. And so this was an event that we looked at prior to the event occurring. And I think that will hold us in very good stead if there was ever a situation where a regulator also came back to look at council and ask council, did we do good due diligence? So that was really the only thing I wanted to raise.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions on your report? Oh, I've got some. You'd be disappointed if I didn't, wouldn't you?
Of course.
Just on page 106 of the agenda, which is page, I think, 2 of your report. Hazards reported by KDC staff seem to be declining.
They do, and they do fluctuate. They go up, they go down. One of the things that we try and do is really encourage our staff to identify things that can cause potential harm. But it is the nature of the beast. Yeah. It does go up and it does go down. What we try and do, though, is make sure that we resolve things that are reported so that people feel that when they do mention something, that something then happens.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to another health and safety advisor, not from council, but from another organisation who's had many years of, and she was interested that I actually had not your agenda, but another agenda that I was sitting next to her reading on the plane. And we just happened to be talking about it, about hazard reporting. And she actually sees that as one of her lead indicators.
I do too.
And in terms of, and maybe, because it goes up and down, maybe could you go back, is it possible to go back and show that history of how it goes up and down over time without trying to create a whole lot of 14 hours worth of work,
Absolutely. So what I did last year is we went into the new financial year. I gave a year in review, and I'll do exactly the same again. So at the moment with these reports, as they're quarterly, I've just been comparing the previous quarter to this quarter, but I will give you one at the end of the time period and say these are the 4 quarters, and actually we can compare to last year as well.
And I would actually because health and safety is a journey, not a destination, and even see if you would go back a couple of years at the end of the year as well to say, right?
Unfortunately, we did actually have very poor reporting data.
I was sort of, you don't want to sort of have to go back and recreate the data.
I don't think we would actually have the data to create, but certainly we've got a good year's worth of data.
Okay.
Through the chair, I just have a couple of queries. So, I mean, some of the events doesn't look like they are real events. Someone didn't close the door behind and things like that. But you also talked about some contractors' health and safety issue. And there is an event in the past, that's page 7. And you mentioned about a volunteer of the Heritage Missionary Club had a lucky escape.
Yes.
Heritage Missionary Club is not a contractor, that they are just leisure occupier, and what happens there is none of our business.
Well, they do have a relationship with the council. They've got a lease arrangement. And so I thought it was worthy of making mention because certainly there's been a lot of work that has happened with that voluntary group to make sure that certainly an event like this doesn't occur again.
Would we responsible for their action in future?
Well, certainly if we don't provide good oversight, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see the government are proposing to make some changes in health and safety and wellbeing as well, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I have one small point on this from page 108, 112 of the full document. The office, in the office, a fall from Mangawai reception chair. And the outcome is chair replaced with non-rolling chair.
It was a very specific chair. It's in our front reception, quite tall.
Yeah.
If you don't get your foot on it in the right location, the thing has a tendency to whip out behind you.
Okay, all right. That's as simple as it was. Okay, all right.
Okay. All right. No other questions?
No.
All right. All right. Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So we've got a recommendation there that we note the health, safety and wellbeing update from 1st of October to 31st of December. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ash, seconder. Councillor Aaron. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Next item is 3.8, page 113. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'll point out a mistake that under procurement, where it says compliance with procurement policies hasn't always been adhered to, and appointments of some consultants have been made directly. It should state. Sorry, that's an error I've made. So it's just to let you know that that is in compliance with the policy, and we because there are a number of project managers that we would working for us. There's nothing really in the report where we're out of compliance. I mean, the building, you can see there, well down, building compliance. Just the number of consents, not so much compliance. Compliance is actually going really well for buildings at 100%, but much lower numbers coming through. And even the numbers of actual inspections are starting to go down now as projects, as building is being completed. On resource consents, you can see that's not quite as bad, it's down slightly, but we have actually been complying. I think to date we're 100%. So in both areas we're actually complying, but just to show you that demand is down. And there's nothing really in the report, but to further discuss.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Good trends.
I have a question,
Yes.
Richard. So in the parks and open spaces, maybe Anim can answer it, non-compliance on Mangunui Bluff tank, and it has been talked about, I've been there twice now. The portaloos are there, the building is closed, and we had sanctioned the toilets. But it looks like if you go through the whole tank, there is no plan how to get rid of the non-compliance and have the toilets in place.
So through the chair, there is, in fact, we've been presenting to council as part of the long-term plan, the replacement in year 1. And the staff are actually looking, investigating another fix at the moment that they may be able to introduce before year 1, which means it's going to be some kind of dry toilet there.
So it's still non-compliant at the moment. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So I know this is not part of the agenda. So what we're seeing, Sue, is a slowdown in building consents. So what does that actually mean for your building team?
Just good.
So for my building team, where it was increased last year, we were using quite a number of consultants. So we have a sort of a baseline number of people doing the building consents. They're also now concentrating on some of the other matters like swimming pool, all the compliance issues. The building consent people can look at that and make sure we're up to date with that, because we have got a small compliance.
Okay.
And we're also not using consultants at all in the building team.
All right.
Change your end.
Yep, it swings and roundabouts. Yep. That's the problem, right? It swings, right? Goes up and down. Right, so do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I do.
Thank you. Seconder, thank you, councillor Aaron. That was very quick that time. All right, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. After this item, or after we've moved into public expenditure, we will take a 5-minute break. Last item, 3.9, page 119.
It's not quite, because there's resolution of past audit recommendations, but
That's what I'm saying, yes. Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah.
it's work program, it's just basically showing you what the work program is.
Yep.
Something to report on that.
I didn't actually see anything to talk about there, right? Thank you.
So in terms of resolution of.
No, so we need to, right, I'm happy to move the work program. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Sorry, Aaron, I saw councillor Mike say. Right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Right. Now, item 3.10, the work, sorry, resolution of past items.
Yeah, so this is just a resolution, this just shows you some past audits. Look, what we are going to do, there are some issues with the roading team that we have, and that there's no asset manager for our roading team. The comments that Deloitte have got in September 21 are repeat on revaluation on the fact that the figures that roading have used don't match the finance figures. They are occurring in 2023 as well as in the Waka Kotaki.
Yeah.
But we're going to close those out and just keep the most current one, because it's the same issues. I'm just advising you of that. We haven't got any way of resolving it at the moment until we actually appoint a staff member. But to make, so it's the same terms, and Deloitte will be back auditing again this year. So I think that's the main thing that I'd report on. If there's anything else that.
Any questions, comments on this?
Just a query on this revaluation, because that figure comes up in our liquidity and all those things, what amount we have and what. So there was 50,000, I think, revaluation. So if the methodology pointed out by Deloitte, is it the methodology or is it just the calculation? What is wrong?
The methodology, there's some discussion there on the methodology. I don't know the intricacies of it because I'm not involved with that part of the audit, and it's really, we rely on NTA to do that. But my understanding is it's not the value per kilometre, but it must be something to do with the materials that are used. I'm not sure in how we revalue. That would have to be a question for our asset manager when we get one. And we'll sort it out.
It's complex, right? I see Jesse's smiling right there, right?
It's a long-standing issue and it's Deloitte, and I think it's, yeah.
Yeah, can I? No? Yeah. The issue is, if it was material, Deloitte's would actually be rating it as an audit opinion concern. So they are happy, as far as auditors can be happy, that the results are fairly reflected. What they're saying is you could actually improve the process significantly, and that's what this is. These are improvements, not necessarily fatal flaws with our system. And I'm yet to see an auditor not issue a management, an item for improvement. They'll always find something, and this is a very common one across the country. I'm not defending, I'm just
No,
explaining.
that's all
And
right.
I think, you know, the issue for me is how much time and effort do you spend on it? And what is the value for the council to resolve it properly?
No, thank you for that. And the other one was the high impact, the risk assessment, 1.5 on Mangawhai community wastewater. And what is the delay in DC calculations in this? It's a high priority.
Can you tell me what page you're looking?
Well, it's page 3. Page 3 is the red item, high impact infrastructure.
Okay, I found this on the web for.
Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't want that.
Yeah, so this will be something I'm talking to you next week about when I bring the DC policy. But I have advised council, we can't do the calculations of the development contributions until you settle on the capital program, which has only just occurred. But part of this is looking back. The auditors want us to look backward, to look at the costs that we might have in just going back and analysing. And I have put that in the DC policy, that one of the things that we should be doing is actually looking afresh at the capacity of the items, because in 2008, they made a judgment on capacity and that some of the items would last till 2050, but there are some items, like I know, have been updated now, like the PS4 pumping station, some replacement of reticulation. So some of those items really need to be taken off the growth. They can't be taken into the growth when we've already upgraded.
Through you, Mr. Chair, do we get to take into account the cost of those additional purchases or replacements of assets that we have, i.e. those pumps? Do we, because that's a cost at the end of the day that has had to be borne outside of DCs. So do we get a chance to include those costs back into the calculations for your DC? So if you like, a retrospective allowance.
So through the chair, yes, we do, and that's always put into every annual plan or LTP. It shows you where it's funded from. But the issue that I'm talking about, and that the auditors are talking about, is going back and making sure that the first cost for the PS4 cost is actually expired now, because we put in a new pump station. So the old cost should have been written off, or if they haven't been collected by DCs, then they then become an expense to the current population. Okay, but it's to make sure you're not charging for the same asset price. So there just needs to be a bit of resolution with that. So that's in my report as well. Next week.
Thank you.
Okay. So one request, please. There's a number of items don't have schedule of dates. Can we sort of, if we can sort of, look, I'm not expecting everything to be done by Christmas, no, this Christmas. It'd be nice to then say as when, by putting a date there, to put some accountability on people. So we've got these dates here. Okay.
Look, yeah, we're trying.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Staff are just under pressure and they don't come back, and we're doing our best. And yeah.
Well, maybe we need to ask them. Yeah. But I appreciate it, but it's just sort of hard to understand. By having a date there, it helps us. So, what's your assessment of the priority and how much work's required?
Yeah, I understand that, but what's happening, like in the situation like with RAM data and that, there's no asset manager. We can't get a date. So, and that's been the issue. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah, I understand the importance of it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, I'm happy. Do I have anyone? No further discussion, questions? Can I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Mike, second Councillor Aaron. All those in favour, please say aye. Can I have a mover to move into public excluded?
Yep. I can second.
Craig, seconded Councillor Ash. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried, and we will adjourn for 5 minutes.
Right.
Just before you knock me out, I'm not sure if my message came through this morning. I have another meeting I need to attend now. And when that's, I'll pop back in if you're still going.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Reconvene at 11:05. 4 minutes. 10 minutes? Oh. 10 minutes. Oh, okay.
Have you got time?